Well, good afternoon and welcome to Real Talk. I'm Dan Edwards with the Eastside Real Estate team, and this is Seattle's Eastside Real Estate podcast. We've taken quite a moment away from our podcast, and I'm really excited to be back on after a minor hiatus. We're going to have a really fantastic podcast today, and if you are watching online on YouTube or Facebook, feel free to send us likes, put some comments in there. We can read your comments in real time. If you got any questions for the guests today, it'd be fantastic. We've got a lot to cover as the market has changed pretty significantly. And also, too, this is streamed on podcasts. So if you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or any other podcast device, you can subscribe to this podcast and listen to me while you're in the car. That'd be kind of cool. So it is Wednesday, July 6th. Basically, half the year is done. We are halfway through, more than halfway through 2022, and what a year it has been. All right. Today, we're going to be meeting one of our newest agents with the Eastside Real Estate team, Sidney Odingo. We're also going to be welcoming Michael Robertson of Prime Property Inspections. Also, we'll have Ann Bryant from Bryant Law, and she is an estate planning attorney. Great conversation once you get into your biggest asset is to figure out how to make sure you protect your family and protect that asset. But before we get started with that, let's jump into inviting our newest agent, Sidney Odingo, onto the live stream today. Hey, Sidney, welcome to the show.
Hello, how are you?
All right, Sidney was literally having technical difficulties up to the last second, so I'm so glad you made it through. Sidney, we're going to actually just kind of talk a little bit like we did earlier this weekend on the market and what's going on, and talk about how home ownership can be a hedge against rising inflation. So, Sidney, let's talk first and most importantly is how long have you been selling real estate?
I've been a realtor licensed in Washington for 3 years now.
For 3 years now. What got you started getting into real estate?
My family always used to drag us as kids around to open houses on the weekends, and always kind of had an eye on the market. And it's something that just translated into what I feel passionate about, kind of just grew into it.
Okay. And so when we talk about what's happening in the market, one of the big challenges that we see out there is inflation. What do you see as how that is affecting our buyers in this marketplace right now?
Yeah, it's making buyers have to sit down with their realtor and have a good plan going forward. It has changed the market as far as inventory goes and how long properties are staying on the market. It allows them to kind of negotiate on their own terms more so than they have been in the last 6 months, if you will.
Yeah, those are some good points, and let me unpack those all a little bit. Is from a standpoint of discretionary spending that people have available to them, because gas costs more, food costs more, that there's a little less to go around as far as the discretionary spending is concerned. So a lot of people are very concerned that they'll have enough money to make their mortgage payments, and so they're considering whether or not they should buy or sell. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah. And then the second part of that you said is, changing the real estate market. And I think that's the interesting aspect of it that kind of actually almost balances itself out a little bit. And here's how I see it, Sidney. Tell me if you agree. But as a buyer now that has a little bit more flexibility in purchasing home, there's a chance that they don't have to actually pay above asking for a property. Is that right?
Yeah. On top of that, I would say that they have a little bit more time to look at properties than they might have recently. You can afford to maybe look over a weekend and have a conversation about it shortly after.
Yeah. There's another piece of that too, is in lieu of price reductions, sellers are actually more apt to offer a credit to the buyer. And that actually has a directly inverse relationship to inflation, because what it does is by actually buying down the interest rate, you're actually able to lower your monthly payment by a couple $100. And that's the couple $100 that you might have to pay on gas or groceries and stuff like that. So it's actually in the favor of a buyer. Instead of paying $100,000, $75,000 above asking price, you're now able to actually offset the inflation that we're seeing out there. So another aspect of a hedge against inflation is the contrast between rents versus owning. So what are you seeing in the terms of rents over the last couple of months?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. I have noticed that in the rental market, we're seeing an increased competition. There are buyers who got priced out in this recent market shift because of mortgages being a little bit more expensive to attain, and so that's putting pressure in the rental market. So people who were considering to buy homes are now considering to rent, and so we're also seeing increase in rent prices as well.
Okay. Yeah, that's a real key. I actually myself was faced with the aspect of deciding whether I wanted to buy or rent. I sold my house and I was looking at the prospect of it. And it made me ill to think about paying somebody else's mortgage and to see what I ended up with. Like, it was almost a level of detachment from the home, because you looked at it and it was like, well, that's not my home. And yet I'm paying the amount of money that I would be paying if it was my home. And it was really kind of like made me sick to the stomach. So I went ahead and bought again. so yeah. So let's just finish this up. So buyers have a different opportunity. It's not the same as it was before. How do you feel about that, Sidney?
I think, like you pointed out before, it kind of gives a feeling of balance in the markets. Earlier in the year, buyers were kind of getting tossed around. There's a little bit of a frenzy, I would say. So for someone who's representing buyers and sellers alike, I feel like there's balance in the market and there's opportunities for both buyers and sellers.
Yeah, and we haven't really talked much about sellers, which we maybe bring that up on the next podcast. But I wanted to spend a little bit of time with buyers, just because there's a lot of people out there that have been on the sidelines because they did not want to be involved in these multiple offer situations. And my advice to you would be, get qualified and then see what the ramifications of some seller paid proceeds on your actually monthly payment. From the highs that we saw back in late May, we're down about a percentage point. So we bumped up over 6 and we've come down to somewhere between 5 and 5.5, somewhere in there is what I have heard, but it always changes. So I can't be 100% sure. Well, Sidney, number one, thanks for joining the Eastside Real Estate team. We're so excited to have somebody with your experience and your passion for real estate. I appreciate you joining us today on Seattle's Eastside Real Estate podcast. Thanks for how can buyers get a hold of you?
Can get a hold of me, personal phone number 425-770-7046 or at sidney.odingo@kw.com.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks a lot. We're going to do a quick commercial break, and then we'll be bringing up Ann Bryant from Bryant Law in just one quick second.